The government work. No, we gotta do this by the book.
Hey, that's why I nominated him.
Okay, it's 1900 hours on January 23rd, 2025. This session of the Planning Commission, Bandon Planning Commission is in session. May I have a roll call, please?
Sure thing. Commissioner Orsi.
Here.
Commissioner Scobie.
Here.
Vice Chair Jerkowski.
Here.
Chair Starbuck.
Here.
Commissioner Norman.
Here.
Commissioner Pressler.
Here.
All right, next thing, an announcement that Mr. Frey has resigned temporarily for health reasons, and he envisions coming back at a future date.
And I just wanted to say thank you to Bill for his service. We're going to miss him dearly, and we do hope he returns at some point.
All right. Consent agenda. Is there any problems with it? We'll have a motion to approve it.
I move we approve it.
I second.
Motion made and seconded. All say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. Public comment. Comments from the public on any item not on the agenda, limited to, is it 3 minutes or 5 minutes now?
What does it say on there?
It says 3.
I think, well, you can decide. I think its standard is 3, and Bear had wanted it changed to 5, but maybe it got changed back to 3. Do you want it back at 5?
Well, let's make it 5 minutes.
Okay, I'm on it.
Anybody? Nobody. All right, moving along. Discussion, Old Town Streetscape Concept Plan.
Yes, thank you. Nikki, if you don't mind pulling up the presentation, I just have a brief presentation about how we got there, and then we can look through the plans together. Perfect. Sorry, it's hard to do Zoom stuff. Just want to make sure we're there. So if you can go to the next slide. So how did we get here? Because I feel like we haven't really talked much about this project before. This was a project that was originally out of the city manager's office. There was a desire to come up with a plan for what to do in Old Town, particularly around the streetscape and parking. It was identified as a potential project because the Old Town area is an urban renewal area. So there's funding coming in each year. And the idea behind urban renewal is that you invest in the district, which then increases property values and creates more money in the district. And so because there's this funding in the urban renewal budget each year, there was just a desire to come up with a list of projects for how to best use it. One of those was this streetscape plan. So we did send out an RFP. And we began a contract with Doherty Landscape Architects. They're based out of Eugene. They're also the firm that is doing our city park master plan. In that RFP, the city identified the following objectives. We wanted to be able to develop standards for things like landscaping, street trees, street furniture, bike racks, pedestrian amenities, wayfinding signage, kind of like anything that you would see as you are standing on the street. In addition to developing a plan to optimize parking. So you'll notice as we go through the plan that they created that there are certain areas where parking is reconfigured, but in general, no parking spaces are lost by any of the plans that you'll see here today. We know that some of our streets are really wide and could be better used for pull-in parking versus parallel parking. So you'll see that, as well as identifying opportunities for street art, outdoor dining, any way to sort of make Old Town feel a little bit more lively. And the other one that's kind of important to note that you'll see is looking at the entries to Old Town and really trying to make them more inviting, as well as making it more of a pedestrian-friendly area. Next slide. So we did do two different sessions, 1 year apart, which I think was funny, the timing of it, for public input. Initially, we did hold an open house at the abandoned library. It was one of the most well-attended public meetings I've ever been to. I think we had about 75 people there, crammed into a room that only allows 50. So it was definitely a popular topic, and the DLA folks presented on their kind of objectives for what they wanted to do. They presented the project. They talked about, after they had walked around Old Town, some of the opportunity areas that they found, and then they gave folks a kind of glimpse at what they were thinking about and wanted to figure out, are we on the right track? So we had some really robust Q&A, and we also had the opportunity for folks to mill around afterwards and leave comments on each of the posters that showed all of the ideas that they had. After we left that meeting, we realized that we didn't have a lot of input from the business owners. And those are the people and the property owners down there. Those are the people that are going to have to look at it every day and deal with the parking situations and hear from the public. So we wanted to set aside a time for them to provide input. So if you can go to the next slide. In August of 2024, a year later, we held some meetings with our business community. We heard from them that oftentimes the location and the time of the meeting is challenging to get to. So we held those meetings in Old Town at the Old Town Tap and Grill. And we held one in the evening and then another one the next morning. So we had a really wide variety of business owners and property owners attend. And we got some great feedback. In particular, they enjoyed the design, but they had some comments about improving car and pedestrian safety and walkability. There were some ideas to maybe put in stop signs at certain locations to slow people down, or at least to allow pedestrians the opportunity to cross more easily. They also had a lot of comments about retaining Bandon's identity, and that is what DLA, I think, really strived to do in this design, is ensure that the historic, the charming feeling, the authenticity of Bandon remains, while also just modernizing and cleaning up some of Old Town. So that's what they learned, and I'm gonna ask Nikki if she could to pull up what I have here in your packet so that folks in the audience are able to see it. We'll go through the plan, if you're able to. I wanted you to see it on a more granular level. And for those in the audience, if you do want to see, I believe we have extra packets available. You're welcome to look through these things closer. Hold, please. The zooming is weird. Okay, I'll talk a little bit about it, and hopefully you can reference in your packet the things that I wanted to go through. So the first one was the reconfiguration of First Street and Second Street. So in the reconfiguration of First Street, there is a widened sidewalk on the north side. That was one of the earliest things that was identified, that a lot of people are trying to walk through Old Town on that north side of the street. But there's a lot of people walking there, and a lot of dogs and tables and everything else. So it was a real desire to extend that pedestrian area. Parking is not affected on that side. Okay, we're just going to go through it then. And hopefully you all have a packet and we can talk through it if you have any questions. The Second Street configuration, we provided some options, and I guess I should back up too and remind everyone that this is a concept plan. So whatever is ultimately adopted, these are just the ideas. There's still opportunity for the city at the time that they decide to do a project to actually drill into it and get a little more feedback. This is just kind of like the comprehensive or zoomed out view of what Old Town could look like, to be inspiring, and then for us to work towards actually implementing some of these projects. So The big thing on Second Street then is this reconfiguration. They provided the city with multiple options for how to potentially reconfigure the street to provide more parking and to create a more safe entry we could do this. Yeah. Can you zoom in though? Okay, so at Second Street, so they gave us a couple options here at that entrance where the arches are to reconfigure the parking and make that entry safer. Ultimately, the one that they came up with was to make it a one-way entrance into Old Town coming, I think it's technically south on Highway 101, although from the west side. And then reconfigure parking there to be able to do the pull-in parking on one side on the south side and then parallel parking on the other. It's an overall increase in the number of parking spaces available there. They had some images that I'm happy to share with you that I think they're in your packet that show a rendering of what that area could look like with more landscaping, planters, with more pedestrian seating areas. Okay, and then some of the pedestrian safety enhancements. Nikki, you're doing a great job. Just stay here. So a lot of the ideas on each street was to do what's called a bulb out, which I'm going to point to here. It's where the sidewalk extends a little bit further out into the street, and it allows for safer crossings for pedestrians, because what happens is the area between the street that they actually have to be out in the roadway is shortened. It also allows for the opportunity for the city to install things like trash cans or benches or street trees. It's just additional streetscape area to have those sorts of things. Some of the other things that they talked about that are in this plan are lighting, so increasing and enhancing the pedestrian lighting. The city just recently did the overhead lights, those lights, but there was a desire to also add in some of the bollard lighting, which is the one that's closer to the ground, just to light it up for pedestrians. And they also identified downtown opportunities. So one of the important things to note here when you look at this plan is it shows things like buildings on private property. And when we had these public outreach meetings, some people were worried because they said, that's my property or that's so-and-so's property, and they haven't designed a building for it. And it's really just to help folks envision what Old Town could look like if someone did build a building there. So we're not telling someone they have to build that exact thing, but just to get your imagination working. So the orange are those proposed buildings, how we could see some infill down there. The yellow area, and orange, the yellow and orange areas, those are identified as potential expansions of the pedway. So right now there's an area that's owned by the city between Alabama and Baltimore. It's known as our pedway. I think people really like it. It's really charming. The consultants provided some examples of similar pedways in other areas or alleys that are really activated by lights and having businesses sort of front or have a second frontage on there. So they identified the opportunity for us to continue that pedway. Again, the pedway is on private property, and we recognize that. We are not proposing at all to take any, there's no eminent domain planned here. It's just an opportunity to recognize what we could be doing in the future if we work together and wanted to see something like this. The other location, and so you'll see if you want to turn to in your packet, the gathering opportunities page is the one that shows what the pedway could look like if it was activated. They also identified some pedestrian connection areas, some ways that we can create what are called mid-block crossings, so places for people to get around. That was on that the next page that they had. And they added in a lot of opportunities for the city to get creative and have public art in different ways. So the one example here is having starfish in the crosswalk. They have benches that have seashells in them. So the idea is to really keep the charm of Bandon, but but have some newer amenities. I also think on the bench idea, they proposed that the city go with concrete benches with wooden accents because they would hold up best in our climate. I'll tell you that when I started working here in 2016, we ordered a bunch of benches that were supposed to have a 10-year lifespan, and I think it was maybe 4 in this climate. Our climate is just really brutal, so we've had a hard time trying to figure out what kinds of benches we want to have when you're trying to balance comfort and cost, and then also longevity. So we've looked at the recycled wood and then concrete as our best options here. Okay, let me see if there's anything else. I think the rest of the pictures that we can't pull up right now, so I apologize. But the other thing to note is wayfinding and signage. So one of the biggest complaints that we've had about Old Town is we don't have any wayfinding. And if you are not familiar with that term, the idea is that a lot of cities have a station where they have, the restaurants are this way and the public restrooms are this way, the visitor center is this way, and maybe a list of businesses that you can find in town. Bandon has programmed that in our budget a few years in a row, but we've never actually purchased it. I think part of that comes from not having an agreed upon design. So by adopting this plan, we're agreeing to this general idea to have this wayfinding and signage program that they've come up with. And again, the details are kind of like ironed out later when you get to the actual construction drawings or design purchase of equipment. And then they're also helping us, and I'll sort of segue into another project that we're working on, which is an update to the architectural review overlay zone. So we were trying to, with this plan, make sure that anything that's going in the streetscape is also going to be reflected in the businesses and the facades of the businesses in Old Town. So the ARO zone update is updating both the process, but then the application of the city's code standards for any building in Old Town. So everything should have a sort of cohesive look for this charming, authentic beach town. So if you're keeping along in the presentation that's in your packet, the next picture, that site furniture opportunities, they did just identify that the benches in there, if you wanted to see an example of them, it's what they use in Depot Bay. And then I think they also mentioned in this plan having, just like I said, more opportunities for outdoor dining. So the other thing I would point out is we have one temporary parklet right now. This plan shows another permanent parklet, just providing more opportunities for people to dine and sit outside. I'm a little bit biased because it's a project that I worked on, but I love when I go by the coffee cafe and see people, or Aloro, and just see people sitting outside having a good time, especially this time of year where we're having splendid weather. So I think there's a desire to have more of that. So let me know if you have any questions in particular. I'm trying to think if there's anything else big in the plan that changed.
Dana, can you speak to the Festival Street? What's the idea behind?
Yeah, that's great. There's actually I'll talk about 2 of these things. So the Festival Street was proposed for Delaware. And the idea behind that is, like, if you think about when we've done Cranberry Festival in the past, and Margaret probably can speak more to this than I can, but there's been some concerns sometimes about having tents or festivals in the street on First Street or Second Street, because those are sort of main thoroughfares. And especially for the fire department, they want to be able to get through. And so, they've always wanted to keep an open fire lane to access businesses. Delaware, on the other hand, is a wider street, so it's 46 feet wide. But it's, the idea, I think, is that it goes to a one-way with parking on either side. And it doesn't have building facades, like no frontages on Delaware. So the idea is that it could be closed down for a festival with minimal impact to the city, both in terms of, preventing anyone from seeing any sort of businesses or blocking their storefronts, and then also for fire access. So I believe Coos Bay did something similar recently. They have but theirs is like a parking lot. They did like a festival parking lot where it's identified as an area where they're gonna have food carts or vendors in the future and sort of set up for that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then you also made me think of the other street I didn't talk about was Alabama. So one of the biggest complaints that we've gotten in the past is that we see a lot of people from out of town going the wrong way down Alabama because it's really wide at the intersection with First Street. And so there was a proposal to do a three-way stop there and potentially a three-way stop at Baltimore, but mostly there. And then also take out one lane for turning and allow parking on Alabama. So we'd be increasing the number of parking spaces and then also hopefully reducing the number of people driving the wrong way.
And then taking a left on Second Street.
Yeah, or panicking at the very end. I mean, I feel like I've seen it all. And Peter at the cobbler's bench was the one who mentioned that because he has to sit there and see it all day long. The other thing that I'll talk about is the delivery drop-off zones. So I'm gonna point them out here, here. So we early on identified that one of a big concern in Bandon is making sure, in Old Town, is making sure that businesses can still receive deliveries even if we widen the sidewalks. So there are going to be designated areas where those delivery trucks can go. We did speak with Margaret at the chamber, and then also some of the businesses that were most concerned. We did think it was kind of funny and timely that when we were having this discussion, we were able to walk out of Old Town Tap and Grill and actually see a delivery truck parked in the street and understand how wide they were. It was just a great opportunity to see that this would actually work, that people could, or that the trucks could get out of the roadway, people could still back up their cars and get around them, and then pedestrians would not be affected by it. Any other questions or things that you're seeing on here that you want to know more about?
Did you ever decide on no parking signs for some of the areas that have historically been a problem? Like people parking parallel by the continuum when they're
That was one of the suggestions from DLA was to at some point, if the addition of parking and the addition of trying to make it maybe more intuitive where you can and can't park, and signing those areas as delivery only, that hopefully that solves the problem. I think there was also the suggestion of if that doesn't work, then the city might consider some parking management tools, which are sometimes signing and saying, no parking, or 2-hour parking or 15-minute parking or whatever it is. But because we have limited staff and resources, it's really hard to enforce those sorts of things. So I think we're trying by adopting a streetscape that might be like a little easier for people to understand, that we don't have to tell people how long they can park in Old Town just yet. Anything else?
Well, just a couple comments. I like what you're thinking about doing on the entrance to Second Street. Because I walk down there a lot and I see people pulling out, taking that Y and pulling out and then cutting or going down to the end of Second Street and then cutting across the southbound lane to get northbound.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't have they have to stretch, looking behind them to see who's coming. So I like the idea that Second Street, the entrance is one way. And it takes away that Y.
Yes. Yeah, I should have mentioned
Provide
too.
for parking.
It does. I mean, everything is a trade-off, right? We've learned that. So you close off, you're not going to have that turn anymore after Raven's Saltwater Grill in
Right.
this particular design.
Right.
But you do gain parking.
Yeah,
So-
I think that's a
and
great idea.
safety.
I've thought about that for a long time and suggesting it to somebody,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't have to now.
Oh, well, maybe the design gods heard you.
Yeah. The other thing is, you talked about stencils.
Yeah.
I think we, instead of starfish or something like that, we should probably cater to what is actually caught:
Mm.
crab,
Yeah.
halibut, salmon, the bottom fish. and use those as stencils.
I think that's a great
And,
idea.
and also, the ports doing the sea urchin,
Mhm.
have some urchin
Oh, yeah.
creeping around.
I think that's a great idea.
Good idea.
I will take that down. I think that some of the comments too that they got at that business owner meeting was like starfish are very generic, but do something that's more similar to Bandon. So I think that's perfect.
Dungeness crab.
I know.
That's who we are.
Doesn't get more Bandon than that. There was another suggestion for seagulls because we have so many of those, which I thought was hilarious.
Seagulls wouldn't care too much about being profiled.
Yeah, probably not. We have seagulls and crows, our favorite. But no, I appreciate that. And I think, and that's where I'm not quite sure what the city council wants to do with this. I know that there's a desire to adopt something. And I think that there will be more opportunity, like I said, when we drill down into like when we're actually going to implement it, what those things look like. So they're just sort of concepts to work with.
It seems like the Second Street idea would be the least expensive to get started with and to get an early victory.
Which part of it?
The one way,
Oh, yeah.
one way to the entrance there.
Yeah, the harder part there is working with ODOT, I'm sure. So,
So would these changes be incorporated into the transportation plan that is currently also being worked on?
yeah, I know it's kind of funny timing. We did send the plans to the folks at Parametrics who are doing our TSP. So I believe they did align that the projects in the TSP match up with at least the street parts of this, not the furniture or anything else, but
Because I do think that the change in traffic patterns is
yes.
great.
Oh, good. I love that. Yeah, I was kind of surprised how many people were really on board with making it more pedestrian friendly down there. Given that I think a lot of people in Bandon drive. So we all know that we need to park. And so we really wanted to be sensitive to that and make sure we're at least maintaining, but I think we might even be adding parking spaces in this plan if we're able to build it out as it's conceptualized. Any other questions? So, my recommendation to you tonight is that if you like the way this looks, you would make a recommendation to the city council to adopt it. By adopting it, they're able to then start working these projects into the urban renewal plan during the budget. And maybe we'll see some of these things happen. And it also provides us with the opportunity to apply for grants. I always mention this, but frequently grants want you to have an adopted, acknowledged plan that shows a project in it, and then it makes it more eligible because it shows that we've gotten public feedback and our public governing bodies have signed on.
All right. Do we have a motion to move this forward?
I make that motion that we move this forward to the city council.
I second.
All right, we have a motion second to move the concept plan onto the city council. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed.
Thank you. And I will mention too, since we had trouble getting this up on the screen, we do have a page on the city's website. So if you type in streetscape plan, you should be able to find all of these on the city's website to look at them more closely.
Moving along. Without any further comments? Okay. Work groups for proposed code amendment.
All right, I hope that you like this one. This came up because I think that we've had a few items that we were sort of laughing about in the planning department that have really struggled to move forward in the planning process. When I dug into some files, it looked like the first time that the city had a work group about dealing with the view line issue was back in the 90s. And so it makes me think that this is something that we should probably try to prioritize and figure out. And also because I think that the view line in particular, what we found in the planning department, we've had a couple folks come in and ask questions about it. It is personal to them. And so they have a vested interest in making a code that works for both them, but everybody, because they care about what their neighbors are doing in addition to what they're able to do on their property. So I propose an idea to have a work group specifically for the view line, but also if there are other topics that we've really struggled to come up with something in these public meetings or in the planning commission meetings that we sort of set aside and have a group of passionate people work on them. We'd still have to get city council approval to assemble a work group, but I I wanted to see what you guys think. One, about having one for Viewline, and two, if you have other things that you think we should try to tackle with these work groups. Any thoughts?
Well, I think that it's not a surprise that there hasn't been a successful decisions about the view line because it's potentially a hot topic, right? When you're really involved in it. It seems to me it's kind of nebulous on some level too. So how do you envision that this work group, how will it add to the process, I guess?
I think that we've had these conversations amongst planning commissioners and potentially we just haven't heard all the ideas that are out there. Because in talking with some community members, they have concepts and ideas. I wish people would bring things to public comment, but that doesn't always happen. So I think that it's an opportunity to get a different perspective that we haven't had before. Potentially, if people want to join it. And I think it's an opportunity to sort of more informally talk through the ideas. I think we can draw things on paper and we can look at maps together, and it could be just a maybe a less formal way of discussing the topic. I'm not sure if it'll work or not, but I feel like what we've been trying so far hasn't been too successful. So I also think that our community members who are passionate about it should have a say in what the code ends up looking like because it's going to affect them most. And I think our council likes to hear from, they don't want to pass an ordinance that doesn't benefit a large group of people or that isn't really a community driven sort of thing on a hot topic like this. So I think that's also a plus for the city council if they choose to go this direction to get a wider breadth of opinion.
So with the community involvement versus an involvement committee be useful in this regard? I mean, strikes me as being very similar to what you're proposing, if it was functioning as we would hope.
Well, the Citizen Involvement Committee, their job is meant to ensure that there's two-way communication between the city and the public. So they're generally not a group that would have a meeting planned and sort of talk about things or talk about a specific topic. They would be talking more generally about community involvement. Does that make sense? Like making sure that people are aware that there's an opportunity to get involved in a work group about a specific topic, but not actually convening or being that group. Okay.
Understand.
Yes. So, and you are all acting as the CCI right now. So I think the idea is that the work groups would be formed from people who are particularly passionate about that topic.
How do you envision the group, like presenting their whatever opinions? What were you thinking?
I was thinking that it could be an ad hoc committee of community members with a liaison from the planning commission. So someone from the planning commission who understands how code adoption works and what codes generally look like would sit on that committee with them. And they would be a recommending body to us. So it would still be a public meeting. We'd still have it open to everybody and filmed, but we could sit in a table setting and talk about things, and then they'd make a presentation to the planning commission to consider.
Thank you.
And they could meet once if they come up with an idea on the first try, or we could meet for longer, but at least when they're ready, they can just come to the planning commission.
What were you thinking as far as a meeting time?
I think I'm open to that. I think I don't have anyone who has expressed any interest in this particular work group, but I have a feeling that if we put something out there, we'd get some people who wanted to join it. And so I would just leave it up to them to let me know when the meeting should be.
I would like to be on the committee, but I don't think I should be the liaison, just because I think it should be someone that maybe's a little
Separated?
yeah, separated from the issue.
I think that's.
So I am passionate about it,
Yeah.
but I think I would like to be on the committee, but I don't think I need to be the liaison. So if someone else would like to be the liaison or maybe, I don't know that we need a liaison if you're there to to conduct the meeting with all the interested parties.
Yeah, I'm kind of open to what it looks like. I think if you are interested, so it sounds like there's some interest. If you are interested in doing this sort of thing, I will bring it to the city council at their February meeting just to get concurrence and make sure it's an okay thing for us to do. And then we'll put out a call for folks and whether you want to join it that way or if this group wants to vote you as a liaison.
'Cause I certainly want to hear what everybody's
Mhm.
views are, because I certainly haven't heard all of them. So sounds like some people have approached you, but
Mhm.
so that would be nice to know what their views are.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of ways of tackling the problem. And so I think I probably haven't heard all of them yet, and I'm sure there's someone out there with the right solution or group of people.
Okay, how many different problems are you thinking about? Because this says, this is saying to me that you're envisioning more than one work group. So how many different problems do you think need to be looked at?
We have so many problems. No, I'm just kidding. The only one I really thought of was the view line, but we haven't done something like this, at least in my tenure here, forming a work group that then sort of advisory to the planning commission on a particular topic. So I just wanted to pick your brains about whether or not that's something you'd like to do. If you have other things that you think we've had trouble working on or getting through that you would like to toss to a community group, I think we could try for more than one work group if we needed to.
All right, would you be comfortable in being the liaison on these?
Absolutely. I
However-
have to be there regardless.
However many problems we have?
Yes. We are committed to helping you solve your problems.
Okay.
So, I mean, you
I'm-
could use the view line as a test case.
That's
rather
true.
than Envisioning that there be 5 or 6 separate problems that it would address.
Yeah.
Um,
I think if it sounds like you guys are okay with it and if the council's okay with it, then I think if we're ever going through a code, a code cleanup or any sort of code amendment, and we have a particular section of that code that we're struggling with, that's when we'd maybe consider forming a work group to work through it. That's how I envision it. So you don't have to come up with problems right now and make work groups for issues we don't have, unless there's something you can think of.
We don't want a VRD work group.
I mean, you might if you want one. That actually came up before of like having a more open community forum about VRDs, but I think because we just updated the code,
Let's just not.
we should be
ever
good.
talk about it.
Yeah, not open that can of worms. But we're willing to open the view line can of worms, at least for now.
Any other comments? Questions?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the Citizen Involvement Committee, which Bandon's certainly not unique, as we've talked about, in terms of struggling with getting citizen participants on that particular committee. And despite its broader mission, if you want to call it that, I think that when there's a very, very specific project that's kind of time limited, that's an opportunity to I think increase interest for citizens who are not on the planning commission or are not involved with the city of Bandon, in any other way other than they live here. So I'm wondering if there's some sort of connection that could be made between the two, which would enhance both. That's my thought.
What do you envision, if I might ask?
I don't have much of a vision. I'm just talking and I'm not thinking a lot, But
Well, I think I'm only asking that because the planning commission is the CCI.
I understand that.
And so I'm trying to figure out how we could use the CCI or the function of the CCI other than letting people know as the CCI that there's an opportunity to get involved.
But the CCI theoretically is supposed to have citizens who are not related to the planning commission or the city. Is that not correct?
The city council amended the code that the CCI is the planning commission, and that's allowed by state law. So, yeah, I mean, in small cities, planning commissions are often the CCI because the role of the CCI is to sort of be, my understanding is the checks and balances, ensuring that there is that two-way communication between the city and the citizens in the land use planning process.
So these work groups could actually be specific to specific to problems that would involve citizens of the town.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the other difference is I assume that someone who wants to join a work group for the view line is probably not the same person who would want to join a work group for, let's say, like an Old Town streetscape planning project, right? There might be two different schools of thought there.
But it would be citizen involvement at this point as a work group,
No, the work group,
which is
just-
what he's trying to get at, is get citizen involvement. Well, this is the way to do that.
sure.
Okay.
So, I mean, the individuals who are not on the planning commission would sit on the work group though.
Mhm.
And then they would report to the planning commission. Okay.
I see the citizen involvement committee perhaps different, because
Okay.
I'm not thinking about it statutorily or what the city council approved or didn't approve.
Sure.
I'm thinking about how do you get more people in here that are
Mhm.
more involved in city government and the decisions that it makes that are not related to employees of the city or members of commissions, standing commissions, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because it occurs to me that, the more buy-in you get from people, the easier things go. And sometimes you have, because we get locked in our own little silos and people can get pretty creative in solving some problems that we want to address.
Absolutely.
As you probably witness when you have contractors come into the planning department and they have all kinds of wonderful ideas.
Yes, that is absolutely true. I mean, we learn a lot from our consultants, but we also learn a lot just standing at the counter. I can't tell you how many times per week I say, I did not think of that. That's a great idea. So I agree with you. I am wondering what the CCI's role is in finding those people, because I think frequently maybe they don't know that these opportunities exist, and that's where a CCI could be helpful in getting the word out. Or, in finding people outside of the silo. I don't know how you find them and make them come to a public meeting.
Well, I think, letting them know
Yeah.
that something's happening, that's just one thing. How do you incite excitement?
Mhm. I think you pick topics that they're passionate about. I feel like that's like one of the first, I mean, we've probably seen it here, right? Where there's some things we talk about and there's one person in the room, and then there's other topics we talk about and it's standing room only. So it's whatever people are most interested in, it seems like they're willing to show up for. But I hear what you're saying, and I'm trying to think about how we reach those people. That usually seems to be the hardest part for me as a staff person.
Well, so when we're talking about this work group, where are you going to
Mhm.
find those three people?
Well, I do know that some people have come into the planning department and are interested in talking about the view line. And so I can only say that because those folks have come in and expressed an interest in solving this problem, that we know there might be some folks available. I think also the city's Facebook page tends to be a great way to reach a large number of people, as well as the city manager's newsletter. So the fortunate thing about forming a work group is there's no time frame around it. I mean, we're just sort of trying to come up with something, but we don't have to meet at a particular cadence or a certain number of times. It's just as long as it's needed. So we can take people onto the committee and they can leave, or they can show up to 1 meeting or 3 meetings. I don't think that it has to be too formal.
I'm done.
Okay, thank you for those great questions. I think that's really important to talk about.
It seemed
Alright.
like people were passionate about the Gorse issue. There was a whole room full of people for that.
Yeah, they love talking about gorse. Or talking about getting rid of it.
Right.
They don't love gorse, but yeah.
Any other comments, questions? All right. Do we have a motion to move this forward to the city council to consider the assemblage of work groups to discuss topics of interest?
So. Second.
Second.
Well, we have a motion and a second to move this topic forward. All in favor?
Aye.
I
Opposed? Motion passed. All right, staff update.
All right, I've only got a couple for you. Mostly they're project-based. So kind of exciting. We started working with a student team out of the University of Oregon's Institute for Policy Research and Engagement to fulfill some of the goals that we set forth in a grant application to NOAA that we were unsuccessful for. So they reached out to us and they said, we saw your grant application. We're sorry you weren't funded. Would you like us to do some of this work for you for free? We said, absolutely, that sounds great. And so we've got a team of 3 students from the university's Master of Community and Regional Planning program. One student is also a concurrent landscape architecture master's program student. And so they are working on a conceptual plan for the Jetty Trail, the continuation of the Jetty Trail, which would be potentially a path on the north side of Redmond Pond or a path on the south side of Redmond Pond, in addition to dealing with some of the storm surge issues that we've had. I just found on my computer a great video from 2022 of when we had king tides at the same time that we had a huge amount of rain, and it really like washes out part of Jetty Road and Redmond Pond and closes it. And so everyone here knows Jetty Road is really the only street in and out from the jetty. So the other component of that project the student team is looking at is doing some education and awareness for those residents in terms of evacuation. So God forbid something happened, we want people to know where to go. So they'll be working on updating a map for the tsunami signage on the jetty. They're working on potentially like an online resource for folks to look to. I believe they're going to be doing some outreach to the Pacific View down there so that they're aware of the potential natural hazards. And then they're also looking at doing some what are those called? The interpretive panels for the path along there to acknowledge and recognize the indigenous history of the jetty and Grandmother Rock. So exciting project. They'll be out here next week doing a little site visit with us, and then they'll be working on this project through June. So we'll have something to present to you later on this year. We also started that city park master plan that I think we talked about. And all we've done so far is a really existing conditions walk with the consultants in the park and sort of identified what some of the issues are and then what some of the opportunities are. There will be lots of opportunity for public input as well. So just watch the city's website if that's a project you are passionate about. We also started, we have a lot of projects going on right now. We were fortunate to get grant funding to do a housing code update with Cascadia Partners. That's our consulting team. We have identified, I believe the first joint work session between you and the city council to discuss the work that they're doing is in April. We'll get you that date soon, but right now what they're doing is they're working on a code audit. So they're going to be looking through our entire code, trying to pick out portions of our code that don't meet state law anymore because the laws have changed. We've talked a lot about clear and objective standards. And then they're also going to make some suggestions for how to make it easier to build housing in Bandon. So you'll see that work soon. There is a portion of the project that I'll just let you know that's going to be expedited because some of the rules at the state level are changing by June 30th, which means we have to get something adopted before then. Otherwise, a list of rules will go into place that probably don't match the city of Bandon's current code. So you'll see that coming up real quick. And then I do want to let you know that we did submit our grant for the Beach Loop Pathway project. The cost ended up being about $3.9 million for about a mile of sidewalk. The pathway is 10 feet wide, and it would go from the Madison Avenue evacuation route down to Face Rock State Park. I feel like that number is a little bit astronomical, so I want to put a little asterisk on it and tell you that part of that funding, almost $1 million of it, we're required to apply for a 30% contingency and then also a 5% plus $100,000 administration fee because it is a federal grant that if we received it, ODOT would have to do the management of it. So it is a lot of money to ask for, but also the project is, the actual cost of construction is a lot smaller. Do you have any questions for me?
You didn't mention I see the open house February 10th?
Yes, I didn't mention it only because Solon in our CCI was going to talk about all the opportunities for public involvement, but there is also an open house coming up for the transportation system plan. And I'll let her give that spiel during the CCI portion. But thank you.
All right.
Anything else? Okay.
All right, we're going to adjourn. Oh, wait, yeah. Commission comments?
None.
None. Not even you? Okay, none. This planning commission is adjourned. We're going to call to order the Committee for Citizen Involvement at 7:49.
I do want to note that we added a public comment section for the CCI because sometimes people want to make comments specifically about CCI stuff. And so we did receive one public comment from a community member.
Citizen comments.
Yeah, if anybody has anything to say.
Where is it?
You received the paper version of the comment. I don't think there's
Oh.
anyone in the audience that's interested in
Oh,
speaking.
all right,
And then we just have one discussion topic.
okay.
Yeah.
Perhaps the CCI could include 2 or 3 members of the community who are not already on city commissions or committees. According to the city's website, the CCI includes 3 at-large members of the general public. The CCI ensures that the citizen involvement program listed in the comprehensive plan is being followed and assists the community in becoming aware of opportunities to provide public input. Thank you for your time and consideration. Steve Friedland.
And I'll just clarify that the city did amend the code in April of this year, so I'm not sure where that came from, that particular thing that you saw on the website, but it should be modified to say that the planning commission serves as the CCI.
Right, you made that announcement earlier, so, okay. Moving along, what do we do now? Update of citizen involvement program. Town hall event presentation.
Hello, everyone. I don't have an actual presentation, but I have some items to share. The first one is that some of us in the planning department and other people in City Hall met with the city's engineer to go over the water master plan and address questions that we had after rewatching the presentation that the engineer gave back to the city council in 2022 about the water master plan. We did this in anticipation of the town hall. Due to the fact that the topic of the town hall is going to be growth management. And we are anticipating that the engineer hopefully is at this town hall on our panel. We also, as Dana mentioned earlier, started our work with Doherty Landscape Architects for our master park plan update. And one of the ways that citizens are getting involved in this is we got our advisory committee appointed and approved through the city council. So we have, I believe it's 6 members who are going to be serving on an ad hoc committee to give us insight into the Parks Master Plan update. Another way that we are getting citizens involved in planning is I've successfully recruited and held my first architectural review overlay zone update advisory committee meeting. One of the people is President Neil. He is a part of it. I lost my train of thought and where I was at. Yeah, just another way people are getting involved in the planning process. We also do have a town hall scheduled for a couple of months from now. I think originally we were thinking March, but it might be April after some consideration with things with the city council and getting things approved. Yeah, once we get the actual town hall date established, there will be a page put up onto the city's website that will have information on the upcoming town hall. And it will have a space that provides the opportunity for people to submit questions that they have prior to the town hall meeting so that us in the planning department can take the questions that the citizens abandoned have, synthesize them down into the main topics, and then have those prepared for the panelists that we will be talking to during the town hall. And then my last item is that on February 10th, the city is having an open house on the transportation plan to talk about the Highway 101 redesign. And this is going to be from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. at the barn, which is the community center over by the park. That's all I have.
February 10th. It's a Monday, yeah, 4 to 5:30 at the barn. And it'll be open house style. So I think there's like a little presentation at the beginning, but mostly the poster boards where you can kind of walk around and see everything. And we did put before you this opportunities for public involvement. It looks kind of ugly because I made it, but Solwyn's going to put together a much nicer template for the future. After we were talking through some of these opportunities, we said, wow, there are a lot of ways actually for people to get involved, but they probably don't know about them. And so it'd be great to just reiterate every month how folks can get involved. And we can post this on the city's website or here at City Hall. So it's just really apparent. But I do want to note that there is a planning commission vacancy right now with Bill's resignation. I believe that a formal like call for applications is going to go out in the coming weeks. So look for that. But the city has volunteer applications up on the city's website that can be filled out at any time and submitted to the city recorder. There'll also be an opening for a housing advisory committee. So with that work that we're doing with Cascadia Partners, we will be looking to assemble a committee of folks who are either working on housing projects or interested in seeing more housing abandoned to join. The survey is still live about citizen involvement, so you are welcome to take that. And then we've got our events listed on there. So we'll keep this updated. Hopefully, it might be repetitive some months, but we just want to make sure that we are letting our citizens know about all the ways to get involved. Do you have any questions?
Would the Housing Advisory Committee be similar to the work group that we were talking about for Viewline, or is it a different?
It would be reporting to staff, but also the consultant team. So it'd probably be a little bit more formal. Those work groups tend to have a very specific agenda and a certain number of meetings that they're sort of working through. And the consultant usually has specific questions or things that they want to have answered by that housing committee. I imagine the working group is like a little bit more informal, just idea generation.
Okay,
Yeah. So if you're interested, let me know.
I am.
Okay, cool.
I think I am as well.
All right. We've been having folks, we'll probably I don't know if we're ready yet to ask for advisory committee members, but we were creating an actual form that folks fill out and then they apply, and we had the city council sort of, we brought it to them and they had it in their consent agenda. So I will send out, once it's available, that form to all of you, and hopefully you can help us spread the word about needing some folks on that.
Okay.
I have a feeling it'll be a popular committee. People love to talk about housing.
Any other comments? All right. We can adjourn from the Citizen Involvement Committee. And we can adjourn from this Planning Commission session at 7:57.